request is when you do have a question or a thought to share, just to get to know each other, please, if you can just say your name and your background so that we get to know each other, that would be amazing. So I thought, given that we are at the Bandaranaike Academy for Leadership and Public Policy, I'll start a question on the public policy implications of what you spoke about. So you spoke about how climate policy particularly needs to be bipartisan. It needs to be de-linked from the political life cycle if we are to have a meaningful, slow but steady approach to solving our problems. So putting that into context, I think in Sri Lanka right now, there is a lot of talk about climate in the policy circles. There have been a couple of policies which are medium-term oriented that have been passed. There's the Net Zero Carbon Act, and there's also the Climate Prosperity Plan. And then from the parliament side, now there's talks of I think a climate parliament. And then also there is talks of a climate act that is supposed to be passed. So there's a lot of things going around. So I just want to know, what are your observations? What are some critical things that we need to keep in mind? It could be positives or negatives as this is going on, just to make sure that we are thinking slow and steady.
I think what is important is for us to look at a national planning process, rather like the process that led to the Mahavali project, which is multidisciplinary and apolitical, looking at the actions that we need to take as citizens, as governments, as regulators, as local government organizations, and so on. Small example, if you're looking in the future at maximizing solar capacity and democratizing solar, it makes sense that we should have a planning provision that you must have rooftops that slope southwards. This maximizes your solar potential. Urban warming is a big issue, and we must set targets for every urban area, every municipal council, to have greening rules. If you go down Parliament Road now, the nar trees that were planted 40 years ago when Jaya Jayawardena first opened Parliament are at last giving wall-to-wall shade on that road. That's the only road we've done it on. Ranasinghe Premadasa tried to do this a little bit, Gotabaya tried to do a little bit, but we haven't got an incentive for municipalities to do this or the UDA to do this. So we need to, that's from a very small, trivially small area. At the larger area, I think to aim for net zero now sounds very nice because it'll probably get us some marks in the global arena, but it's not going to do anything in Sri Lanka. We're a long way from net zero. Net zero means replacing all our petrol vehicles and diesel vehicles with electric vehicles. This ain't going to happen. It simply cannot do it because if you look at the volume of foreign exchange that we need, remembering that we're insolvent, we're not going to be solvent anytime in the next couple of decades. This is not really going to happen without getting us further into debt. So we have to, I think, bite off what we can chew without trying to overplan. But what we really need most urgently is, I think, the sustainability of agricultural systems. So preventing saltwater intrusion is something that I think is number one priority. And then looking also at the requirements of agriculture by having a really good weather monitoring and weather prediction system at the micro level. Because, you know, when you're traveling around Sri Lanka, you very often see that the weather you get in Balangoda is not the weather you get in Palmadulla. It's very different. Even here, sometimes it's raining in Kotte and not in Colombo. Climate in this complex terrain of Sri Lanka tends to be quite complicated, the weather. And to help agriculture, I think the best we can do is to have really good data sets on which we can model future microclimates. So stuff like that is what I would have in mind without trying to do these big things, to have an annual provision for doing at least the small things that matter. Because I know the president is keyed in on his climate university, for example, but if that was such an important thing, the IPCC would have pointed to this at some point and said, look, what we really need for climate is a climate university for the world. Nobody's said that. So could it be that we are right and the whole world is wrong? It's unusual, right? Gotabaya said the same thing about organic agriculture. And we all saw what happened there. So exceptionalism is something we should try and avoid. The IPCC has a really good framework for getting the best scientific thinking from the whole world, and we would be foolish not to follow that thinking.